Primetime News with me, Akisa Wandera. Thank you for staying with us. Pressure has been mounting on President Uhuru Kenyatta over the numerous reports of corruption in his government. Over the last few weeks, the corruption scandals have moved even a notch higher on the power hierarchy, with a number of President Kenyatta's cabinet secretaries being adversely mentioned and quizzed by the anti-corruption bodies over the loss of billions of shillings. And this has led to calls on the president to wield the axe and stop the rot. On our special report behind the headlines tonight, our KTN Political Affairs editor Ben Kitili asks, has the president lost the war on corruption?
President Uhuru Kenyatta has barely 42 months to implement his Agenda 4 programs and entrench his legacy. But that potential legacy is increasingly being threatened by runaway corruption in his government. As the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions work to get convictions in court, Kenyans have been calling on the president to deal with theft of public funds much closer to his office. Can and should the president fire cabinet secretaries that have been mentioned in corruption scandals? If yes, just why is he not cracking the whip? President Kenyatta could be facing arguably his biggest dilemma yet in the war against theft of public funds. The head of state has already publicly expressed his displeasure with the way his cabinet has conducted itself in seeking to fulfill his agenda. Now it gets worse. The number of members of his cabinet being linked to corruption scandals seems to be rising by the day. The news headlines on corruption in Kenya read something of a fiction film. The figures dizzying. Corruption unrelenting as Kenyans lose billions of shillings, probably trillions, stolen from public coffers despite rising public debt and dwindling economy. The latest scam is the one involving construction of Kimwarer and Aurora dams in the county of Elgeyo Marakwet, where 21 billion shillings is said to have ended up in the pockets of a few individuals. And Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich has already been quizzed in relation to the multi-million scandal, with claims of kickbacks.
If it's corruption, it's not balala. And if it's breaking the law, it's not balala. I am a well-seasoned politician and experienced civil servant.
Rotich's tourism counterpart Najib Balala has also been questioned over a contract awarded to an American firm. More claims of kickbacks. President Kenyatta's silence, even as members of his cabinet, his own appointees, are implicated in corruption, seems to anger Kenyans, who are now telling their president to fire corrupt cabinet secretaries. Amani National Congress Party leader Musalia Mudavadi has punched holes in Kenyatta's war on corruption.
This country must move away from the vacuous talk on the handshake and on to action. Having had more than enough on the handshake, we demand that we must now begin seeing handcuffs.
Kenyans have taken to social media to express their fury over the wanton corruption in government. The issue has been a trending topic on Twitter for days, with the president being roped in on hashtags, please sack these CSs and corruption KE. And the message from these Kenyans is clear.
The country wakes up every morning to news of a new scandal. Each of these scandals runs into billions of shillings. The thieves have become so daring that it must now be understood that this government believes that corruption is part of the gains of being in government. Meanwhile, the country is hoodwinked with a lot of empty rhetoric about a make-believe war against corruption.
We are talking about mega thefts, plunder of public resources, schemes to fleece the country, actually to destroy the country. So I think what is happening in this country is not corruption, it's plunder.
is the sheer number of CSs the president may have to punish, putting him between a rock and a hard place. And can the president actually sack his entire cabinet?
If Uhuru was serious, first he will sack the entire cabinet or ask them to resign, and then he will maybe retain 1 or 2 or 3 good ones, but the rest will have to go home. That will be the beginning point. And remember, there's also a question of perception. People want to see something being done. The beginning point, even before you talk about systems, there's that which you as an individual can do. You hire these fellows, the Constitution gives you the power to fire them.
The political leadership in Kenya has indicated they support these corruption fights. The civil society has indicated they support these corruption fights. The private sector has indicated they support these anti-corruption fights. And more important, the taxpayers, Mura, Wanjiku, and Nafula, have indicated they support these fights. So the president sits in a very good place today that every single Kenyan is sick and tired of corruption.
Political pundits believe the political matrix inside the majority Jubilee party may prove to be another dilemma for President Kenyatta. Could the composition of his cabinet be a possible cause of political backlash if he even attempted a purge?
Well, you know, the beauty is that President Kenyatta is not seeking for another term in office. He is serving his second and last term. And if he so desires to fire the entire cabinet, there will be political repercussions, but they will not threaten his stability. And you know, he's got very good political insurance from other political leaders, other politicians. He's got goodwill from Prime Minister Raila Odinga. He's got goodwill from Salim Davadi. He's got goodwill from Kalonzo Musyoka. He's got goodwill from Moses Wetangula. And his deputy has indicated, as late as this morning, that he supports the president in his fight against corruption.
I don't think it's because of your PTNA formulations. I don't think it's true. Because if there was a corrupt Kalenjin, you would sack him and ask Ruto to give you another Kalenjin, if there must be a Kalenjin. If there's a corrupt Kikuyu, you want so that your people don't say they are not in government, you sack the corrupt one and tell Macharia to go home and then bring another Kamau.
In 2018, one of the biggest corruption scandals was the maize importation scam, where a Senate ad hoc committee recommended that Rotich and then Agriculture CS Willibet be held responsible.
The president means very well for Kenya, but that the people who serve under him who do not mean well for Kenya. And in my view, outside the president taking action on his cabinet, then we have the second level, probably more critical, the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commissioner is the employer of all public servants in Kenya, and they can manage corruption simply by a simple administrative act, by suspending a public servant who is suspected of having engaged in corruption. And in my view, the president should immediately call the Public Service Commission and give them fresh mandates and tell them that the buck almost stops with them.
You just say, from today onwards, this is a new Kenya, not business as usual, no stealing. You sack your cabinet, call Maraga, call the AG, call all the players, call Duale, who is a leader of majority, at State House over breakfast, and say, look here, the games we have witnessed must come to an end.
Article 152 of the Constitution outlines circumstances around which the president may fire a cabinet secretary, including gross violation of the Constitution, committing a crime under national and international law, and gross misconduct.
Kila mtu akisikia mimi niko ndani ya serikali, au mnataka wengine wawachwe nje? Mnataka wengine wawachwe nje? Sisi tuwataka kila mtu ajisikie hivyo.
So why does it seem like the head of state is unable to crack the whip on his own cabinet?
There is a state and then there's a deep state. There is a president and then there are forces of power outside State House. So you may be blaming an individual when in fact he doesn't have as much power or as much control as you think. Then there's a question of actual ability. Does someone have the ability? Then there's a question of vision, you see. Countries that have been transformed by leaders who had a vision. So it's a whole mixed bag. Is it that the person doesn't have a vision? Is it that the person doesn't have the capacity? Is it that the deep state is too much for him?
This is not the first time that President Kenyatta is being faced with question over members of his cabinet. In January 2018, the president kicked off his second term in office with vigor, sacking 13 out of his 19 cabinet secretaries. Among those dropped from the cabinet included Amina Mohamed, Eugene Wamalwa, Mwangi Kiunjuri and Hassan Wario. Rachel Omamo, Phyllis Kandi and the then embattled Willie Bett were also off the New Year cabinet list. The names of Cleopa Milo, Adan Mohamed, Dan Kazungu, Judy Wahungu, Cicely Kariuki and Jacob Kaimenyu were also missing from Kenyatta's list. However, later on, the president brought back Amina Mohamed as Education Cabinet Secretary, Eugene Wamalwa as Devolution CS, and Mwangi Kiunjuri being in charge of agriculture. Omamo also retained a defense docket, as did Adan Mohamed in industrialization. Cicely Kariuki was moved from public service to health, as some of the other sacked ministers were posted to other positions as ambassadors and national representatives.
I think we are getting to a point where there is almost nothing Uhuru can salvage. And he's allowed it to go that far. Soon there will be nothing to salvage, honestly.
In an index report released by Transparency International earlier this month, Kenya was still ranked as one of the most corrupt countries in the world, tied with Nigeria, in position 144 out of 180. The March 9th handshake under attack because of corruption.
If it is necessary, we as ANC will take the country back to the era of mass action.
Kenyans cranking up the pressure on their president to salvage their country.
This path is very predictable. You see, you can play with the politics for 100 years. What you can't play with is economics.
The clock is ticking and President Uhuru Kenyatta seems to be running out of time and Kenyans' patience. All eyes remain fixed on the house on the hill.